Hi, I'm Peter Chan, National Weather Service Program Lead of the Alaska Weather Show, and I have a very important change notice to share with you. The last TV broadcast of the Alaska Weather Show in the traditional sense over the airwaves will be on Saturday, June 30th. Starting on July 1st and thereafter, the National Weather Service will provide a modified web-based version of the program on a new YouTube channel. So that means you'll be able to find us. We'll be moving from at AKwx TV to at NWS Alaska, and you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel now. There will be a public comment period from May 15th through July 30th, so please send your comments or concerns to nws.service-change-comments@noaa.gov. And if you have any other questions, you may reach carrie.haisley at noaa.gov and donald.moore@noaa.gov. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to today's show. Our first graphic here showing the fire danger map for specifically grass, and you can see where it's been dry and the sun's been out. That's where the highest fire danger is. Real high up here, or quite an area of very high fire danger for grass over the upper Yukon Valley, in the Koyukuk Valley, and then right on down along the Yukon River, all the way out to the Delta there, very high fire danger with some medium fire danger into the Seward Peninsula and the remainder of the Yukon Delta. But either side of that zone, a lot of blue here to the south, to the north. Then it gets a little higher again, medium, with some areas of high to very high, maybe over the southern southeast coast, and then again up around the Haines area. And for spruce, got a little of that lingering here for the southern panhandle areas, as well as up around Haines. Otherwise, pretty low, and definitely low here to over southern Alaska and to the north of that zone right through here. Not as widespread in the very high fire danger as it was for grass, but still the upper Yukon Valley seems to be have the highest fire danger for either grass or spruce, and then somewhat less here as you trail off into the Yukon Delta down the river. And satellite imagery showing that dry slot right through here where the highest fire danger is. Sunshine, temperatures 60s to lower 70s there right along the Yukon River from the Delta on up in toward the upper Yukon Valley areas. A lot of sunshine again today over the southeast coast. And then moisture and rain showers coming in across southern Alaska today. A band right through here, which should pick the rain up again later this evening or next few hours here over the Kenai Peninsula Cook Inlet area as it pushes up. Another low pressure area here and something of a front right through there. Otherwise, system tracking eastward in the Arctic coast, bringing some light precipitation up in that area and gusty winds at times. And then out to the west, next front, pretty good low pressure. It's off the chart there, actually pretty wound up, but the front weakening after having some gale force winds into the western Aleutians overnight and early today. That front falling apart, already starting to weaken as it pulls away from the low center that's hanging back to the west there. But that'll spread some rain into the central Aleutians this evening overnight. It's going to have a tough time making its way over to Nikolsky there for tomorrow. But on the chart today, you can see low pressure south of Nikolsky there in the frontal boundary. Pushing moisture up, especially along this kind of weak warm front here, kind of sliding northeastward, brought the heavier rainfall, came a little heavier and sooner than I thought it was going to yesterday. Third of an inch falling at Anchorage late last night, early this morning before it ended, and then kind of off and on throughout the day here over and toward the Copper River Basin western areas up to the Alaska Range with dry conditions over the Copper River Basin, sunshine over the Panhandle today, and some showers from the eastern Arctic coast back down, just pretty widely scattered here along the Yukon River, and then sunshine over the Yukon Delta. For tonight, moisture continues over the southeast interior, south central Alaska area with some rain into Kodiak Island, with that next front pushing up, and some moisture starts to work its way over toward Yakutat. Low clouds and fog again prevalent along the coast, some of that working into the inside waters overnight tonight. Stays dry and variably cloudy and mostly clear here from the Yukon Flats, right on down the Yukon River Valley all the way out to the coast. And then this cold front brings some light rain and snow across Kotzebue Sound, northern Seward Peninsula. Colder air up here over the Arctic coast north slopes. Look for periods of light snow up there tonight with rather gusty winds, maybe up to 35 miles an hour there for the central and western Arctic coast as that low tracks eastward. Lighter winds off to the east there. And then high pressure, low clouds, Bering Sea, eastern Bering Sea here under high pressure, light winds, rain pushing into the central Aleutians. And that front pretty weak now as it drags eastward there with rain ending at Atka tomorrow morning, and just basically dry conditions all the way out to Shimia. Stays dry with light winds, default high pressure over the eastern Bering Sea, areas of low clouds and fog possible anywhere in that area. Weak low Kodiak Island keeps it wet and cool. Definitely cloudy here with periods of rain and showers through tomorrow for the North Gulf Coast right up into the mid and upper Tanana Valley. Weak cold front now with some light rain or showers up in that area. A little cloudier for the Panhandle with a risk of a shower or two in the afternoon. Better chance of showers for the southeast coast on Thursday. And Thursday afternoon, northern half stays dry down to the south, and cloudy, cool, showery conditions all of southern Alaska here in green shaded areas. Weak trough, more of a general light rain, fog and drizzle pattern there for Kodiak Island, holding temperatures down. And then this front here holds together enough to bring some light rain into the Alaska Peninsula, grabs onto a little bit more moisture and pulls it up, and that'll bring light rain into the southwest coast as well. Partly and mostly sunny over the northern interior. A few rain and snow showers over the eastern Brooks Range, extreme eastern north slope on out to the Arctic coast. And a weak trough may bring a few skiffs of flurries and some fog to the central Arctic coast, otherwise dry with light winds up there. Low pressure keeps it pretty unsettled out here over all of the Aleutians and the southern Bering Sea, with a lot of clouds, a lot of moisture, a lot of IFR flying conditions. And for lows tonight in the 50s, upper 40s to lower 50s here for most of southern Alaska. And then highs tomorrow in the 60s for the Panhandle, near 70 again for the Copper River Basin around Gulkana, Chisana, and those areas. Otherwise, upper 50s, south central Alaska, lower 60s in the, or actually upper 60s around Nicolai and McGrath, mid 60s Bristol Bay. Lows again in the 50s. In fact, upper 50s for the northern Panhandle, and upper 40s for Kodiak Island. And then that'll be followed by highs again for the Copper River Basin, about 70, and upper 60s there for the Kuskokwim Valley, lower to mid 60s Bristol Bay, mid 50s Kodiak Island, and in the 60s for the southeast coast. Up north, 30 to 35 for the Arctic coast, otherwise central interior, upper 40s to lower 50s, upper 30s out toward the Bering Strait. Highs tomorrow, mid 70s, Yukon Flats, lower 70s in toward the Koyukuk Valley, and 30s for the Arctic coast. Lows again just dropping a shade below the frost point there for the Arctic coast, even down towards Shishmaref. Otherwise, pretty mild, mid-50s here for the Fairbanks area, Yukon Flats, followed by highs 70 to 73 for maybe 5 in some areas here like Chok-Yitzhak, and mid-30s for the central Arctic coast. Out to the southwest, lows tonight 40 for the Pribilofs, otherwise in the 40s for the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, lower 50s Bristol Bay, upper 30s St. Lawrence Island. Highs tomorrow near 40 for Savunga and Gamble, near 50 for the Pribilofs, upper 40s to lower 50s for the Aleutians, mid to upper 50s there for the Alaska Peninsula, and there you are for.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, for Wednesday morning, several pretty good zones of IFR. One out over the southwest Bering Sea, western Aleutians to about AKwx. Another one here, eastern and northern Bering Sea, from the Bering Strait all the way down to the Pribilofs, eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, some IFR there. Big area of IFR here for the Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak Island, and also up along the Alaska Range. This mostly due to low clouds there along the coast of the Panhandle, low clouds, fog, some marginal VFR getting into the western inside waters. Otherwise, IFR, mostly central western Arctic coastal areas for the afternoon. Still some lower conditions hugging the coastline of the Panhandle. A lot of IFR across the Gulf of Alaska up into Prince William Sound. Marginal VFR south central Alaska to the Alaska Range. IFR, Fognak Island, Kamishak Bay down the east side of Kodiak Island, back in across Sitkinak, AKwx, and a big area of IFR central and eastern Bering Sea kind of branching off here. One right into Bristol Bay, another branch northeastward there, St. Lawrence Island, into Norton Sound, the Bering Strait, and lingering IFR there for the western Arctic coast, VFR interior Alaska. Another push of IFR here over the far western Aleutians. And you can see that whole area slides east-northeastward a little bit there, again back into AKwx, and this zone pushing east-northeast as well. But south of St. Lawrence Island, St. Matthew Island, St. Paul, St. George, eastern Aleutians, into Bristol Bay on the north side of the Alaska Peninsula, interior Alaska VFR, some IFR again along the Alaska Range, marginal VFR, Madanuska-Susitna Valley, Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, IFR, Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound, into the Panhandle. And for the afternoon Thursday, that all burns off there to VFR conditions in the afternoon for the southeast coast. Marginal VFR here for the North Gulf Coast and areas south and east of the Alaska Range. Kodiak Island mostly marginal. And no change up there in the Arctic coast. VFR over the interior. And big area IFR, as usual, here out over the Bering Sea, extending down to the central Aleutian areas, Unmak, Unalaska Island, marginal VFR, as well as the Alaska Peninsula. Passes Anatuvik, marginal VFR for the day on Wednesday with that band of moisture right across the Brooks Range there. And for Adigan, same forecast, marginal VFR at times throughout Wednesday. And Lake Clark and Merrill, mostly marginal VFR, especially on the eastern entrances of both passes there. Rainy, same forecast, mostly pretty marginal at times for the day on Wednesday. And windy, lowest conditions here will be on the southern approach. Possible IFR here, especially early on. Marginal VFR for the pass and then better out to the north there. Isabel, marginal VFR for the pass and south with VFR conditions on up into the valley. Mintesta, VFR. Tanita, marginal VFR. And Portage, IFR. Chilkoot and White, another VFR day coming up. For the freezing levels, cold up here over the Chukchi, 2,000 feet or less there into the western Arctic coast, but rising pretty good, 8,000 feet there across the southern Seward Peninsula, in across the Yukon Flats, 10,000 feet along the North Gulf Coast, 12,000 feet there over the central Aleutians. Icing, not a whole lot, nothing really all that significant. Possible light rime icing coming into the western Aleutians there, and then a band of possible mixed icing here along the Alaska Range, Copper River Basin, and North Gulf Coast areas. Otherwise, moving on to the jet stream here. With this upper low tracking eastward now slowly, we've got 90-knot westerlies there on the south side of that feature right across southern Seward Peninsula, 80-knot west-south westerlies there for the eastern North Slope and Arctic coast. Light winds under high pressure for the Panhandle, and westerlies here just south of the Aleutians at about 90 knots. And for 3,000 feet, pretty good winds here across the North Slope due to that low over the Arctic Ocean there. 35 to 45 knots, even down to the central Brooks Range, pretty windy at this elevation. 40 knots trying to push into the western Aleutians out west. 3,000 feet, lighter winds, but still about 35 knots there for the central Arctic coast. And high pressure, light wind conditions, northern Bering Sea into Bristol Bay interior, pretty light winds, as well as the Panhandle. Turbulence. Possible light to isolated moderate turbulence here for the western central Arctic coast and also out over the western Aleutians.
Since time immemorial, that's when the polar ice used to reach us. Gulusik, the mother ice. The Gulusik was the one that set the winter, and it brought with it abundance of whales, seals, marine mammals.
I started going out in the ocean with my dad about 6 or 7 years old. We couldn't wait to go out to be with the elder men and face the ocean.
My dad taught me how to hunt and fish when I was a very young boy. He took me away out in the ocean and he taught me how to ogre hunt. I got scared. I looked up at my dad and he wasn't scared. So I haven't been scared ever since.
We would go out roughly 30 miles out from here, and you can hear walrus from a long way. They have very poor eyesight. You know, they could smell you, so you always went, downwind. In the old days, there'd be hundreds on a piece of ice, I always tried to find one or two that were by themselves. They could be a pretty dangerous animal.
And I felt privileged to be out there with my dad and his brothers to be able to provide for our family and our people. But little did we know this change that was coming.
My life cycle basically begins in January. So in January, we have muskox. We also have moose. Then that time of year, the crabbing in the ocean starts.
I have fish eggs, muskox, walrus.
April and May, I'm bear hunting. End of May, the ducks come. Beginning of June, the trout start running in the river, and we'll cut 100 trout to put in sea oil. End of June, the salmon show up.
Cranberries, blueberries.
In August, we'll do 100 to 200 silvers in the smokehouse.
Salmon berries, my rhubarb.
For 9 whole months, 9 whole solid months, the whole of the Bering Sea would be completely locked up. Now we're down to 3.
The ice is coming later and leaving earlier. We probably won't have freeze up maybe till January, but it's still too unsafe to go out on the ice.
The biggest thing I've seen out of this climate change is we have an east wind. East wind is always a warm wind, 30 above, 20 above. East wind brings warm weather. We need that 20, 30 below to create the foundation for us to operate on the platform.
In the Bering Sea region, sea ice is an extension of the land. It provides a platform for whaling, for travel. It enables them to hunt and to access food in the ocean that it would be much more difficult to access otherwise.
And this is the tomcod fishing that happens. But as you can see, there's plenty. A beluga, ogre hunting, one of our elders butchering a caribou.
We've lost over 70% of the entire volume of Arctic sea ice.
Ice used to be like 8 to 10 feet thick. Nowadays, it's like 1.5 feet, 2 feet thick.
Chop a hole in the ice and, throw some salmon eggs in there and we pull out trout and whitefish and grayling. But if it's melting a lot earlier, then that opportunity goes away.
We can't venture out on the ice even if it comes up to our island. It's not solid, so we can't risk going out on the ice.
Many communities use shortfast ice for whaling, but they also rely on the pack ice.
Even in mid-March, I'm looking for ice as far out in the ocean as I can go, and that's not normal.
At the Arctic scale, we've lost over 40% of ice extent in the summer.
2,000-pound animal, to try to pull them up on the ice with the 4 guys, it's so much easier to go after them while they're on the ice. It's getting more dangerous to go get them.
Walrus has been our most powerful ally for survival. The tusks were used for tools, hunting, harpoon heads, spear heads, arrowheads, and the skin was used for food. The female walrus skin was used for skin boats.
half a ton of meat, blubber, and food, and that'll feed a whole village, man.
Our food resource has always been within close proximity to our villages, so that we didn't have to spend a lot of money to go fill our freezers.
What's going to be on the breakfast table tomorrow? In a week's time, will we have enough food to feed our family, to feed our community, to feed our children, our elders?
The other thing that the ice provides is a platform for sea ice algae.
When it forms in the winter, it's like a playground, and a living playground for a lot of the plankton and the zooplankton.
The krill eat the algae, the fish eat the krill, the seals eat the krill, the mers eat the fish.
Without the ice, we're losing all that, and we're starting to see a lot of shorebirds and even some sea mammals start. Just this summer, I counted 20 young baby ugrux from the spring that had started to death. Our garden is dying.
One thing about the native population is they adapt very well. If the salmon go away, they replace that with something else. And if the ducks aren't coming, they'll find something else. Instead of waiting till May to go hunting, I'm hunting in April and March. I think we're facing a different kind of change that we haven't really seen before. I think, if the crabs go, or if the blue whales go and we don't see them, if the seals don't come back here, how do we adapt? I don't know that we can.
My ancestors say that we've been on that island for over 10,000 years. What is very powerfully painful to me is that as we're losing our age-old way of life, literally melting away, our identity is being lost. But we're still here. We're still who we are.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And marine forecast with the south coast of the Panhandle. Westerly winds on the day Wednesday at 15 knots, seas 7 feet. Central coast, west winds at about 10 knots. And then up on the north coast, winds out of the east, 15 to 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Lynn Canal, southeast winds, 20 knots with 4-foot seas, while Stevens Passage will see a light south wind at 10, southeast at 10 for Clarence Strait. For Thursday, south coast, west winds 15 knots. Central coast here, south to southwest at 10, so staying light there with 4-foot seas. Light east winds on the north coast as well, seas at 4 feet. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, Stevens Passage, central northern inside waters. Winds mostly south at 10 knots and northwest at 10 for Clarence Strait. Prince William Sound for Wednesday. Winds out of the east at about 10 knots, seas 2 feet. Eastern North Gulf Coast, southeast wind at 15. Western coast there, south of Resurrection Bay here, northeast at 15. East wind 20 knots for the Barren Islands, but light variable wind conditions, Kamishak Bay. And for Cook Inlet, variable to southwest breeze at 10 knots. And for Thursday, Cook Inlet, winds south to southwest at 10, seas 3 feet. Southeast 15 for Kamishak Bay with 4-foot seas, west at 15 for the Barren Islands. And variable winds at 10 for the western North Gulf Coast, eastern North Gulf Coast, Middleton Island area, east at 15. Prince William Sound, southeast at 10 with 2-foot seas. And for Kodiak Island, variable to northeast winds for the day Wednesday at 10 to 15 knots. Alaska Peninsula, light variable winds. Light variable winds also in the forecast for Bristol Bay. Seas down to 1 to 4 feet. And for Thursday, The Alaska Peninsula, Pacific side here, still winds light and variable, seas at 3 feet. But on the Bering Sea side, south to southeast at 15 with 1 to 2 foot seas. And Bristol Bay looking at southeast winds at 15. Kodiak Island, light variable winds at 10. Eastern Aleutians, south to southwest winds, 10 to 15 knots for the day Wednesday. Adak and Atka, south at 20. Western Aleutians, south to southwest at 15 to 20 knots with 8 to 11 foot seas. And then for Thursday, Kiska Island to Shimia, north to northwest at 15. Amchitka, south to southwest, 20 to 25. Adak and Atka, south to southwesterlies at 20. And for the eastern Aleutians, south to southwest winds, 15 to 20 knots. Southwest coast tomorrow, northwesterlies, 10 to 15 knots. Seas down there at 2 feet. Light variable winds for the Pribilofs at 10 with 3 foot seas, east of 15 for St. Matthew Island, and west winds at about 10 knots for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island. And for Thursday, light winds here, St. Lawrence Island, Norton Sound, with seas no more than 2 feet, light northeast breeze at barely 5 knots there for the Yukon Delta coast. Southeast at 10 for the Kuskokwim Delta coast, light variable winds for the Pribilof Islands, St. Matthew Island, northeast at 15 knots with 6 foot seas. And up to the north here, Chukchi Sea, variable winds mostly out of the north, give or take northwest to northeast to east at 10 to 15 knots. Small craft advisories here for the western Arctic coast, and brisk wind advisories for the central coast there for southwest winds at 25 knots. And for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west-southwest at 15. And moving on to Thursday, central and eastern Beaufort Sea coastlines, west winds 10 to 15 knots, northwest at 10 here on the west side, and the Chukchi Sea looking pretty light as well, out of the north to northeast at 10 knots, and those seas down to 2 feet or less. And for tonight, I've got this low tracking eastward just north of the Arctic coast there. So periods of snow here for the North Slope Arctic coast. More southwest flow there, milder, so mixture of precipitation, but all light through this area. Stays dry here through the central interior. Weak trough keeps rain and showers, clouds, cool conditions here for the North Gulf Coast into the southern Alaska. Fair over the Panhandle, some low clouds and fog along the coast. And the next day, cloudy. Wednesday, tomorrow, cloudy and rainy southeast Alaska, very weak front up there to the north, and then on Thursday, not much change from what it'll be tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.